study of the conflict between the history of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Probably going to call history done tonight. So if you didn't pick up one of these, they're out there on the back table, and you can pick up one of those. I had to cut a slide to save a piece of paper, so if I'd have done 17 slides, that would have put one slide on a whole sheet of paper, so I cut a slide. This slide right here that you normally see. So we're going to jump in. Let's do a review. And it's been a bit. It's been a couple of weeks. Thanks to Brother Alejandro for filling in for me last week as I had to travel down to Texarkana. And so last time that we were talking, we called it the era of war. So what I mean by that is this is the time when the Israelites fought the Egyptians, and then they fought the Jordanians, and they fought the Syrians, and countries. So countries against one another. And you can see through there, I won't belabor this, but we know the 1948 war was the War of Independence, the Israelis call it. This was the, Israel was declared a nation, something 14th. Was it May 14th, June 14th? I've lost the date. It's something 14th, 1948. And on the 15th, the whole Arab world really come against Israel. And it was about a 1.5 year long war, settled by a ceasefire. Never wasn't any peace treaties, but just a ceasefire. And Israel won that war. They actually even gained property. Then in 1956, there was a war about the Suez Canal. This was actually a war led by the French, and Israel was involved in that because the Egyptians were cutting off their waterways, and that has been a huge problem for a long time. Even a bit of a problem right now if you're watching any of the news. Israel's kind of landlocked if they don't have access to the southern routes. Now they can go all the way out to the Mediterranean Sea, but that sure is a long way around. You got to go all the way around the coast of Africa. So that was going on in 1956. The United Nations got involved in that. For the first time, the United Nations had troops, and they sent those troops down to the Suez Canal. And that war lasted about a year. Then in 1967 was the Six-Day War. This was the war in which Israel struck first. And here's what was going on. Egypt had come across the Sinai Peninsula, and they had told the United Nations forces to go home. And so we knew Egypt was coming across the Sinai to attack them from the south. Syria and Lebanon had moved their troops toward the borders of the north, so they were about to be sandwiched. And so Israel said, we're not going to sit here and take it. And so they launched 100 and something jet air fighters, and they wiped out the Egyptian forces. They wiped out the Lebanese, Syrian forces, and in 6 days won that war and won like 60%, 70% more land. They won the entire Sinai Peninsula. This began the process of land for peace, where the United Nations struck up an idea and said, Israel, you're in a good bargaining seat. So tell these Egyptians, we'll give you your land back if you will sign a peace treaty with us. Tell the Syrians, the Jordanians. And so this started the Land for Peace. And it was actually in 1978 that Egypt took it. Egypt took that. Now, in between there, 1973, there was another attack on Israel by Egypt, Syria, and others on Yom Kippur Day. I think it was October the 6th, most holy day. This is the Day of Atonement. So the day in which I know there wasn't a temple, but originally it was the day in which the high priest went into the Holy of Holies to make that one sacrifice one time a year for all the sins of the nation. They didn't have a temple, and they had a high priest, and there were things that went along with that, and it was a very holy day. But 1973 war, and it was really bad on Israel. Israel took a huge hit in 1973, but they did recover, and this is really the time, believe it or not, This era of time, early 70s, mid 70s, is when the United States began to actually help Israel. We think that we've been helping Israel all these many years. This is one thing I learned. In 1948, so what's that movie again, Jack, Carolyn? What's the name of that thing? So y'all figure it out for me. That movie brings that out really well. We got John Wayne in it. So, I mean, anything's got John Wayne. John Wayne's his general. And all the military guys are saying, look, you ain't going over there to help those Israelites. What's it called?
Cast a giant shadow.
One more time.
Cast a giant shadow.
Cast a giant shadow. So that's about that war. It's worth the watch. It really is. It's worth the watch. And John Wayne keeps telling that other fella, and I can't even remember his name, but he's the star of the movie, that you ain't going over there and helping those Israelites because they're going to get wiped off the map anyway. And that was kind of the attitude of the United States in 1948. Even in 1967, there was an arms embargo on the Middle East. Now, somehow, we hadn't figured this out yet, but after the war was over, there was a whole lot of American artillery found over there. Wonder how that happened. Nobody knows to this day. Nobody knows how it happened. Tongue in cheek. But officially, the United States was not helping Israel. And I'm going to tell you why. You may like this, you may not. It's called Arab oil. So do y'all remember the oil embargo of the 70s? Let me tell you why. Why were we having an oil embargo? Because the United States started helping Israel. That's why. I was born in 1970, just to tell you how old I was. All right, next slide. So, United States really becomes a player with Israel and all this that's going on in the 1970s, and then up through the 1980s. And the United States has been a voice of peace. They have tried to have peace, and we're going to look at those things tonight. But in 1982, this is where Yasser Arafat begins his reign of whatever, terror, I'm not sure what you call it, but he was the leader of the PLO. He had established his presence in the country of Lebanon. But the PLO is, give me a minute, I'll think of the name when you don't have it on your maps.
I know the answer to that one.
What?
Palestinian Liberation.
Yeah, but he started another thing before that. Before he became Fatah, F-A-T-A-H, he started an organization called F-A-T-A-H, Fatah, and he became the leader of the PLO. But originally he was of this Fatah, which was a military organization. It was a militia. And so it was very much terroristic. And tonight our lesson is called the era of terrorism. And the era of terrorism really got its go in the 70s and the 80s. Palestinians, and they were fighting a much bigger entity. The army of Israel, depends on who you talk to, some would argue with you that Israel's army is the second strongest army in the world, only behind yours truly. You can make that argument back and forth, but it does show Israel they're pretty well, they hadn't lost yet. So that may say something about God's providence over Israel, but it may say something also about their military strength. Next slide. So let's talk about terrorism. We don't know anything about terrorism. We hadn't heard anything about it on the news in the last 24 hours, right? It's one of the biggest things that's going on, right, in our country. Well, and I got this from the CIA website. They list, and I had to count, because they list 60 different terrorist organizations worldwide. And 35 of those have operations in the Middle East. Now, that's not just Israel. That could be Iraq, Turkey, it could be Syria, it could be Yemen, all the way down in the south part of but there's 35 different terrorist organizations. I listed some of them. So you have Al-Qaeda, and there's only about 15 different ways to spell all of these names. I just picked one, okay? So Al-Qaeda, Hamas. Anybody heard about Hamas lately? Hezbollah, you heard about Hezbollah? ISIS, and then the Islamic State, which is I don't know. Taliban, we heard a lot about the Taliban during the Iraqi and the Afghan war. Now, here's the other big part of that, and that is countries supporting terrorist groups. I don't think I'm unveiling brand new stuff to you. You've heard about this kind of stuff. Who's supporting Hamas? Who's supporting Hezbollah? Who's behind the Taliban? All of that stuff. Well, this is from the CIA website, and I'm taking what they say. Now, they take countries on and off of this list all the time. So tomorrow the list may be different. But right now, these are the countries from the Middle East that are known supporters of terrorist group. Iran, top of the list. I mean, that's big news. It's all over our newspapers. It's all within Congress. It's a big thing. And of course, we know about the trading of rockets recently between Israel and Iran. Well, that's what that's all about. It's sort of a little bit about, two teenage boys walking beside each other in the hallway, and they kind of bump shoulders. They're trying to figure each other out. And I will tell you why Iran has not attacked Israel. Because they're scared of them. That's why. And they have reason to be scared. If Iran thought that they could take Israel off the map, they would do it. The reason that they support these terrorist organizations is they are trying to weaken Israel. There's another reason. They're trying to give Israel a black eye in the world courts. We know that Israel was just in court in the United Nations over genocide, right? Y'all heard about all that. Well, that's kind of laughable to me, but they said that Israel had intentions of wiping. Genocide, by definition, means you're going to kill every person of that ethnicity. That's the pure definition of genocide. Well, Israel has Palestinians who are citizens and a part of their parliament. So no, they're not guilty of that. We'll talk about do they need to pull back a little bit? We can talk about that in a moment. But these are the countries. Now, why do I have parentheses around Iraq and Afghanistan? Because they were removed from the list in mid-2015s for Iraq, 2019 for Afghanistan, but just give them time. They'll be back on the list. So they kind of come and go, depending on what they do and don't do. I wanted to show you something, just so you can see it with your own eyes. So what we are seeing in our world today is a lot of, from the river to the sea, all of that kind of stuff. I'm a little bit, it angers me on this side, but it just baffles me on the other side. What are these people reading? I mean, I'm reading the same stuff that they're reading. I purposefully chose not to read after Christian authors because I knew that would be a slant toward Israel. I purposely read non-Christian authors. But I don't know what they're reading. I really don't know. Because, well, let's show. Next slide. This comes directly from the Hamas Charter, which is kind of like saying the Constitution of the United States. Now, Hamas is not a country. They are, well, they're a terrorist organization is what they are. But if we were on their side, they would call themselves a political organization, a resistance movement, as they say right there. They are supposedly for the Palestinian people. So the first thing that is said there, these are, now I hop, skipped, and jumped, but this is the first words of their charter. Praised be to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. That's their first words, first sentence of their charter. Skipping a little bit, the Islamic Resistance Movement, i.e. Hamas, is a Palestinian Islamic national liberation and resistance movement. Its goal is to liberate Palestine and confront the Zionist project. Anybody want to read between the lines? What's the Zionist project? It's called Make Israel a Nation Project. That's the project. Now, this is the 2017 version, which is the one they go after, but you can actually look up the 1988 version, and it's much more radicalized. So they try to use a little bit of political correctness, but the Zionist project, just go ahead and say, Israel becomes a nation. That's the Zionist project. Confront it. Its frame of reference is Islam. What does that mean? We operate according to the Islamic religion, which determines its principles, objectives, and means. So what's the means of Islam? Jihad. Right? That is their means. Going further, Palestine is the land of the Arab Palestinian people. From it they originate, to it they adhere and belong. Next slide. I may have to read that from mine. Some of my stuff up there is getting covered up. So let me read. Palestine is an Arab Islamic land. It is a blessed sacred land that has a special place in the heart of every Arab and every Muslim. Hamas rejects any alternative to the full and complete liberation of Palestine, and guess what it says? Where did they get that slogan from? Where did it come from? From the river to the sea. There you go. And I'm just telling you like I read it, those people who are doing what they're doing in all these college campuses are supporting a terrorist organization. You say, oh, that's just your opinion. That's the opinion of the United States of America. That is what we have, the CIA, the FBI, the ABC, the 1, 2, 3s. We have these lists, and Hamas is on the list. It is a terrorist organization. Also, furthermore, it is on the list that Hamas is supported by Iran. That's not a rumor. That is stated by our government, the Central Intelligence Agency. The expulsion and banishment of the Palestinian people from their land and the establishment of what's the Zionist entity? That would be Israel. So the establishment of the Zionist entity therein do not annul the rights of the Palestinian people to their entire land from the river to the sea, and do not entrench any rights therein for the usurping Zionist entity. Next slide. Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine. It's also the capital of Israel. Its religious, historic, and civilization status is fundamental to the Arabs, Muslims, and the world at large. Now listen to this closely. It's Islamic and Christian holy places belong exclusively to the Palestinian people, and further to the Arab and Islamic Ummah. What is the Ummah? That is an Arabic word that is really reserved for the Islamic nation. Just as we would say Christianity, and we're talking about Christianity at large, not just our church, not just our denomination, Baptist, but Christianity at large. Ummah means the same thing for the Islamists. So everything, all of these holy sites in Jerusalem, who do they belong to? The Islamic nation. Even the Christian ones. Not a stone of Jerusalem can be surrendered or relinquished. The measures undertaken by the occupiers in Jerusalem, who would that be? That would be the Jews. Who owns Jerusalem right now? Jews do. Such as Judaization, settlement building, and establishing facts on the ground. There's a lot of political talk right there. Are fundamentally null and void. We reject all of those. The Zionist project is a racist, aggressive, colonial, and expansionist project based on seizing the properties of others. It is hostile to the Palestinian people and to their aspirations for freedom, liberation, return, and self-determination. Now, they actually messed up. They said the Israeli. The Israeli entity, they missed an edit right there. The Israeli entity is the plaything of the Zionist project and its base of aggression. The establishment of Israel is entirely illegal and contravenes the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and goes against their will and the will of the Islamic nation. The liberation of Palestine is the duty of the Palestinian people in particular, and the duty of the Arab and Islamic nation in general. I didn't make that up. Straight from the internet, you can go read it yourself. It's much longer than that. I read the whole thing. But I picked out the juicy parts for you. So there you go. That's what they intend to do. Why are they attacking Israel? Because they want that land. How did we start this study? It's all about the land. That's where we are now. It's all about the land. All right, let's go to the next slide. So from 1987 to 1993, terrorism, right? The first intifada. Now that's an Arabic word that simply means rebellion, uprising. And from 1987 to 1993, and I have a little bit of memory of this. Y'all probably have a little better memory of this. So I graduated high school in 1989, so I wasn't really politically tuned in at that time. I wasn't watching Fox News every day. I don't today, but there was a barrage of terrorism during this period of time. I mean, it was every day on the news. This is where the suicide bombers got their fame. So a lot of these Palestinian radicals strapped themselves. I just remember the funny movies, quite honestly, making fun of the suicide bombers. Do y'all remember that? Shows what kind of TV I watch. I remember, that they're all on an airplane and a guy adjusts his jacket and all you can see is dynamite loaded right there. Never mind. Y'all are not on my same wavelength tonight, sorry. But that was this time. There were people blowing themselves up left and right, and lots of innocent civilians, Jews and Palestinians, were killed during this time. Now, what happened in 1990 and 91? The Gulf War. So I was 21 years old in 1991, and I thought I was going to Iraq. I thought I was going. I was ready to sign up. I was a freshman at the Missionary Baptist Seminary in 1991. And do y'all remember the Scud missiles? Remember that night? Why did Saddam Hussein and Iraq shoot Israel when it was the United States that was invading them? Because they could. That's why. Because they could. Their Scud missiles wouldn't reach Washington, D.C., but it would reach Tel Aviv. What was that all about? We hate Israel. That's what it was all about. Now, during that era of time, believe it or not, let's flop places with Iraq and Iran. In 1990, it was Iraq who was the Iran of today. They were the ones that were supporting a lot of the Palestinians, these Palestinian terrorist organizations. We had not even heard of terminologies like the Taliban and ISIS. ISIS didn't exist back then, but the Taliban did. We hadn't heard about all these. We didn't start hearing about all these until the early 2000s, but they were in operation, and a lot of them lived in and around Iraq. And we can say, that there was that big whole thing about they didn't find any chemical weapons. Do y'all remember all that? Well, I was fairly smart enough to know at that time that it wasn't really about chemical weapons. It was about killing terrorists. That's what it was about. And you say, nothing new under the sun. Why is there so much Israel attacking the Gaza Strip right now? They're trying to kill terrorists. That's why. We'll get to that in a moment. So 1993 to 1998, there was a little bit of a lull, honestly, of negotiations between the Israelis and the Arab nations and the PLO. And so for that 5-year span of time, there was some peace. And I can remember that. I can remember nothing's blown up lately in Israel. I remember some of that kind of talk. I do remember this. Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, both were prime ministers of Israel. And then Yasser Arafat, they won the Nobel Peace Prize. Y'all remember that? I was blown away. Yasser Arafat wins the Nobel Peace Prize? That's really and I mean, Saturday Night Live had a heyday with that. I mean, they're like, Yasser Arafat. I can remember that episode. Do y'all remember the news episode when they interviewed Yasser Arafat and he had won the VLO and he's got this big, huge gun out? Y'all are not funny tonight. Y'all are just not. I'm trying. I'm having a great time up here. All right. I just remember all that. That was hilarious. I mean, if you know anything about Yasser Arafat, if you lived in the 70s and knew the Yasser Arafat of the 70s, he was well known for killing thousands and people, even his own people. And he wins the Nobel Peace Prize. Laughable. Next slide. That's the world we live in. So 1994 was a big deal. My first baby was born that year, but that's another story. But Israel and Jordan signs a peace treaty. And you know what? It's still intact. Israel and Jordan live under a peace treaty. I will tell you a little bit about Jordan. What I've learned and read about them, they want nothing to do with Palestine. They don't. They don't want anything to do with Palestine. They can't afford it. They don't want to be in a fight with Israel. They would just like to live on the east side of the Jordan River and not mess with anything on the west side of the Jordan River. And that's kind of the attitude of the Jordanians right now. It's the Palestinian Authority that is all about the West Bank. So, 2000, Camp David Summit, President Bill Clinton. This is probably the closest that the Israelis and the Palestinians came to signing a peace treaty. Israel was all in. There's I don't know if it's famous anymore, but at the time it was, and it is, I need to write these things down, but it's Yasser Arafat and the Prime Minister of Israel at the time with Bill Clinton right in the middle, and they're shaking hands. Famous picture of that. That was at the Oslo Accords. The Camp David Summit. And the day they were going to sign that peace treaty, Yasser Arafat refused to sign. I'm talking, it was going to happen. We're going to have a Israel-Palestinian peace treaty, peace in Israel. Bill Clinton gets to claim it all for himself. It's going to be a great day in the United States of America. And Arafat says no. With little explanation, really. And the rumor is, read it on the internet, that the Muslim Brotherhood sent him a message. You sign, you die. Let's go back a few years. When Egypt signed a treaty with Israel, what happened to their president? He was killed. So, and you can read all kinds of stuff about this, but there was like 12, I may be stretching it a little bit. There was several different autopsies done on Yasser Arafat in 2004 when he died, trying to figure out how he died. The leading opinion is he was poisoned. Who did it is a mystery. So I go into the world of conspiracy theories and you can figure all that out. But this was probably as close as we've ever been to a peace in Israel. Next slide. 2000 to 2005, right after the Camp David Summit. And I'm going to talk about this in just a moment, but just say what it is. The Second Intifada, the uprising, the Palestinians uprising. Now, Ariel Sharon was the Prime Minister of Israel. And he was kind of a, I don't know if I want to go as far as a Donald Trump, but he was kind of a bulldog. He was kind of a, if I can kick the Palestinians, I will. So what he did is he went to the Temple Mount under the guise of that some, as I understand, I've never been over there, but if you want to dig for worms over there, you've got to have 15 different government agencies to agree with you that you can dig a hole, because there's so much stuff over there. So supposedly the Palestinian whatevers were doing some construction work, and they were messing up some stuff. And so Ariel Sharon went to make his presence known, and he walked on top of the Temple Mount by the whatever, the Dome of the Rock, and kind of paraded himself on the Temple Mount, and all you know what broke loose. The Palestinians protested violently. The Israeli police got involved. There was bombs that went off. There were rocks that were thrown. There were the Molotov cocktails thrown. And so even today, you can read 5 different opinions, and get 12 different opinions. But was it Ariel Sharon's fault? Was Yasser Arafat underneath that? Here's what I'm going to say. This relates to what's going on right now. The Arab nations, I'm not going to speak for the Palestinians, but the Arab nations do not want peace for Israel. They really want to make it as bad as it can possibly be for Israel, in the hopes that maybe some of the Israelis will leave, or in the hopes that as Israel strikes back, the larger international community does what they're doing right now and saying, Israel, you're being too strong, you're being too harsh, you're killing babies. And so some suggest that after the 2000 summit, when Arafat would not sign, and some say he was threatened, that he was also told, you go back up there and you stir up some violence. That's what we have for 5 years. And Israel took a strong arm during this time, and they were heavily criticized. I remember this very clearly. They were heavily criticized for their amount of strength that they used against the Palestinian people in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. I mean, we're repeating history today. And in 2006, as this is kind of dying down a little, the first time you ever heard of this name, Hezbollah. Iranian-backed Hezbollah. Do you remember when Israel went into Lebanon in the 80s and they kicked the PLO out? Well, Israel occupied the southern region of Hezbollah up to the year 2000. We didn't know that, but they did. They had when I say they occupied it, what I mean by that is they had Israeli troops on the ground, just like we have troops on the ground in Germany, we have troops on the ground in Japan. Do we still have troops on the ground in Iraq? I think we do. I think we still have troops on the ground in Iraq. I don't guess we have any in Afghanistan anymore. But nonetheless, they had troops on the ground in Lebanon. And in 2000, the Lebanese said, we want you to pull out. Israel was there almost in the same fashion that we do that a lot of times. We will go into a troubled area, and what will we do? We're peacekeepers, right? Israel is doing the same thing in the Middle East. They go to Lebanon. The Lebanese country is in a civil war. Hezbollah comes in. Iranian-backed Hezbollah is a terrorist group. Look in the CIA. That's exactly what it says. They're fighting them today. This is the northern borders. So Gaza southern, Hezbollah, Lebanon north. So Hezbollah comes and they attack Israel on the northern border, and Israel responds, and in 30 days they run Hezbollah out of town, or at least they run them out of the southern area of Lebanon. Hezbollah still operates out of Lebanon today. They have a headquarters in Beirut. So let's do some more reading. Let's go to the Hezbollah Manifesto of 1985. This is what they operate under today. So Hezbollah, the same people that they're fighting today, the reason that Iran and Israel just exchanged missiles, Hezbollah is right in the middle of that. So here's the Hezbollah Manifesto. Let us put it truthfully. This is only a small portion. Let us put it truthfully. The sons of Hezbollah know who their major enemies who are their major enemies in the Middle East. Now, I am going to say that you're going to pronounce that phalanges, like your fingers. Do y'all have a better pronunciation? When I did the YouTube pronounce this, that's what I got. So is it phalanges or Any got a better shot at it? No, nobody. Well, they are not your little fingers. What they are is a Christian Lebanese political, they do have a military organization. They were on the opposite side of the Lebanese civil war that was going on in the 90s and some of the 2000s. You had the Islamic Hezbollah group, and I'm just going to say it's the Phalanges or the Phalanges, I don't know. That group was the Christian side, and they were having a civil war. So that's their first enemy. Second, Israel. Third, France. And guess what? We made the list. We made the list. The sons of our Ummah, what's an Ummah? Islamic nation, are now in a state of growing confrontation with them and will remain so until the realization of the following three objectives. Number one, to expel the Americans, the French, and their allies definitely from Lebanon, putting an end to the colonialist entity on our land. I told you that the Arab people had a bad taste in their mouth over the French and British mandates. You remember that era of time we were talking about? The colonies? And this is the reason that the French and the Arabs are still lovers. They still, when Yasser Arafat died in 2004, the French gave him an honorary guard. And that goes back to their colonial days. I thought that was a stupid move, but nonetheless. So that they have a bad taste in their mouth about the colonial days. Number two, to submit the Phalanges, whatever, to a just power, meaning they need to stand trial for war crimes that they committed during the Civil War. Bring them to justice for the crimes they have perpetrated against Muslims and Christians. I didn't get that Christians part, but nonetheless. Number three, to permit all the sons of our people to determine their future and to, now listen, you got to listen closely, to choose in all the liberty the form of government they desire, which basically says, y'all choose what kind of government you want. But keep reading. We call upon all of them to pick the option of Islamic government. We want you to have the liberty to choose, but we highly suggest that you choose the Islamic government, which the Islamic government alone is capable of guaranteeing justice and liberty for all. Now, what kind of track record do they have? Y'all tell me that. What kind of track record do Islamic governments have in providing justice and liberty for all? No, that's not happening. How much justice and liberty do you get in Iraq? How much justice and liberty do you get in Iran? You want to go to Yemen? Anybody vacationing in Yemen this summer? I mean, they have some great beaches, I hear. I ain't going. I mean, they are not ideal tourist places. All right, I made my point. Only an Islamic regime can stop any further tentative attempts of imperialistic infiltration into our country. That's what Israel's dealing with. That's what they're dealing with. I mean, this is the logic of the people that they're trying to negotiate peace with. Now, in all of my reading, and I got to finish, I know. In all of my reading, what I have come to the consensus of, Israel didn't do everything right. And I actually tried to go in with an objective mind. I love Israel. I think that land, that land belongs to Israel because God said, but Palestinians are made in the image of God too. I feel for the average Palestinian just trying to farm his goats and get goat's milk and live life. I feel for those people, but they have got some crooked people in power. They got some mean, nasty people in power that hire terrorists to do their bidding for them. Keep going. Every time Israel gives up land, and Israel tries to get along, they try to cooperate with the United Nations. So they gave up Lebanon in 2000. Who moves in? Hezbollah. So they gave up portions of the West Bank. And this goes back to the 1967 war. And they said, okay, Palestinians, this land, the West Bank that we know today, you take it, you govern it, and they get the PLO and Yasser Arafat. In 2005, what was called the PLO is now today called the Palestinian Authority. Pretty much the same group. Because the PLO had such a bad name in the 70s, they had to change the name. But the Palestinian Authority said, and Israel has been all about the Palestinians having their own nation in Gaza and in the West Bank. And even has worked out situations where they could connect the two. So in 2005, the Palestinian Authority says, we want you out. And what that means is Israel's going to take all their army men out of the Gaza Strip. When I say occupied, that's what I mean. They have their army men in those places keeping security. 2005, Israel says, are you sure? Palestinian Authority says, we got it. So Israel said, all right, we're moving out. They move out. 2006, Hamas moves in. And they say, hey, we taking over this place. Palestinian Authority people says, you ain't either. And they threw them out of windows and off buildings and shot them. They killed all the Palestinian Authority people. They stormed in to their government headquarters and threw the officials out the window and took over. Now we have a Gaza controlled by Hamas. And just days later, guess what Hamas starts doing? Shooting rockets into Israel. One after another, daily. Rockets into Israel. 2006 to the present. Next slide. How many years is that? 15 years, 16 years, more years than that? Israel says, y'all stop doing that. Y'all stop doing that. Don't be shooting no more rockets at us. And they do that daily and daily and daily. And they have this Iron Dome thing, you know. They're pretty good at shooting rockets out of the sky. And they tell these, and I'm getting a little bit, heated, but they tell these terrorist groups. Now, I mean, just put yourself in their shoes for a moment. If we have a terrorist group in Cuba, and they're shooting rockets at Florida every day, what are we going to do? Are we going to say, now you Cubans, stop that. Stop doing that. Quit shooting those rockets at us. And Israel put up with that for years and years and years. And they said, as long as they stay in Gaza, we will maintain. We will not fire back. We will not fire back. And then October the 7th, 2023 happened. And they killed 1,200 Israelis, 35 U.S. citizens. And it is pent up anger. After being shot at for years, and now Hamas crossed the line literally. They came into Israeli, as in the Israel's land, as in what they own, what is Israel. And they bombed and killed Israeli citizens. And I mean, yes, Israel went after them full force, open bore with all they had. Now, I looked at a lot of different places. I don't believe anything the Palestinians say, but most of the United States say that the death toll of Palestinians is up to about 30,000 in Gaza. That's as many people that live in Bryant. Now, has Israel gone too far? I know what Israel's trying to do. They're trying to put an end to Hamas. And, I just wanted to compare from 2003 to 2006, when we were involved in the Iraqi war. We killed about 150 to 200,000 Iraqi soldiers and civilians. Why did we do that? Why did we go after Iraq in 2003? Come on. Why? 9/11. We were attacked. One time. Do I regret the Iraqi war? Not one moment. So I really get frustrated, and I can get a little heated. I get a little passionate when they start telling Israel, pull back, pull back, pull back. Maybe they need to pull back, but they don't need to let up. Because if they do, and Hamas gets their feet back on the ground, what did we keep saying when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan? Let's use the force that we need, finish it, and come home. That's what Israel wants to do. Let's use the force that's needed, finish it, and come home. There's another thing. There's hostages over there. If we have hostages in Afghanistan and we find out about them, what do you want our government to do? Well, we got to sacrifice a few Americans. Is that going to be our attitude? We're going to throw a fit until somebody says, send some troops over there and get them. Is Israel wrong for doing the same thing? Next slide. That's just a map. This is the areas that were attacked on October the 7th. Well, I got to quit. Thanks for your attention. Oh yeah, we don't have time for other issues. We have enough issues as it is, okay? All right, let's mention a few announcements. Then we'll have time for prayer requests. So Mission Committee will meet Sunday, 8:45. So Mission Committee people, please be there. We got some things we need to talk about, particularly about with Alejandro. So please be there for that, 8:45. Deacons will meet after the morning service on Sunday. Vacation Bible School, I just realized it was May, about 4 o'clock today. So it's May, y'all. But we got a VBS in June, and it's early in June. So just give it a real long time of prayer. And I want all of you to ask, God, where do I need to serve in Vacation Bible School? And really pray about that, because it takes an entire church to do Bible school. I'm doing my part. I've got a job in Bible school. So what's your job in Bible school?
Okay, we have a list. You still need a 2-year-old teacher, a 3-year-old teacher, a 5-year-old teacher, and a 1st grade teacher. We need teachers. We need some nursery workers, some game workers, and music people. Okay,
so we got a lot of needs. So where do you need to work? Where do you need to work? All right. And there will be some VBS work nights coming up, but if I read them to you, you wouldn't remember them, so you'll see them in your bulletin on Sunday. Any other announcements? Prayer requests. Oh, yes.
There's plenty of food left in there and desserts on the stove.
Food in the kitchen. Okay, now let me say goodbye to our online audience first. Thanks for being here tonight. You got a prayer concern, send it our way, and we'll help you pray for it.